everyone. This is Kristen Darcy with our Tell All Tuesday, a very special Tell All Tuesday for NIAW, which is National Infertility Awareness Week. And that is sponsored by Resolve every year. And I'm excited about this year's hashtag, which is Start Asking. And I'm so thrilled that my bestie and amazing colleague, Amy Demma, is with me. She's the founder of the law offices of Amy Demma. And we're going to be talking about Start Asking, about creating your family for the modern single woman. Boy, have we come a long way, huh, Amy? That we're talking about such amazing options and what a young single woman should be asking. And I'm so delighted to be with you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for offering this opportunity to start this dialogue with women who are juggling so many other things, pursuing so many other goals, but thank goodness as a result of technology and all of us who make family building easier, they can keep having a baby on their radar while pursuing other goals. So it's a very, very exciting time for the modern woman.
Well, you know what, Amy, I want to share a little bit of my story, and you know my story. At 22, I got out of college, and that's a long time ago now. I opened my own preschool. I secured this grocery store, if you can imagine, and had 51 kids a day, a staff of 28, and kept bumping up against that. Why don't you get a nice little teaching job? Men would say to me that I was dealing with. You should have a nice teaching job. So I opened my own company, I bought my own home, and here I was getting close to 30 and single. And I remember announcing, poor choice on my half, announcing at a holiday table that within the year, if I didn't, find a partner, because my goal was to be a mom, I was going to sperm shop. Now, you have to remember, so I'm dating myself, that was 30 years ago, totally inappropriate, totally, especially in a very Catholic family, to announce that, I'm going to start obtaining sperm. So I am over the moon to be able to talk about the freedom that these 20-year-old women, 30-year-old women, 40-year-old women have for choice. So I would love to hear your advice for a 20-year-old woman, 20-something-year-old girl who is driven, educated, accomplished. What should we be talking about, asking about?
Yep. So we're going to define two types of women in their 20s. The first being the woman who's got slam dunk fertility. She can count on her fertility. She's had no indication, no diagnosis that she is not otherwise able to naturally conceive. And then we'll talk about the woman who has infertility in her 20s. I was diagnosed with infertility as a young teenager. My story is quite different than yours. So I was very much aware of a clock ticking. I was very much aware of medical conditions that I had to contend with. I did not have the internet. I did not have resources. I barely had contact with Resolve when I was going through my family building. So for the woman who is dealing with infertility in her 20s, what's fantastic about 2016 are all of the resources that are available. Resolve can reach that young woman who is not in family building mode today, but knows that she has an infertility challenge. Resolve can reach that woman in any way that they need to, or that woman needs to be reached. So we're talking about online events. We're talking about in-person events. We're talking about newsletters. We're talking about all sorts of options available to access community and avail yourself to resources to the single modern woman who is in her 20s, knows she has infertility, but is not yet in family building mode. The woman who is not dealing with infertility, but she's in career building mode, or she is otherwise focused. We have fertility preservation options. We have egg freezing, and egg freezing is becoming increasingly more and more popular. Folks are taking the message out to where women are. So there are all sorts of events that are being offered in clinics, in more friendly environments where women gather across the country. If you're a woman in your 20s, your fertility is intact, you are not in family building mode today, but you eventually do hope and plan to have a baby, access the information that's available for you for fertility preservation. It is just wonderful that these young women no longer have to sort of push to the background their family building. They can get active at their peak fertility, preserve it, and access it, and all of the other things they're working on have a more solid foundation.
Amy, I want to jump in here too, because I have a little bit of a soapbox, because you know where my wheelhouse is about fertility, which is the emotional component.
Sure.
And I have to really address how you have to advocate for yourself, but also be aware that, you know, they're having egg freezing parties, and it's so great to go back to the circle, the sisterhood of divine feminine, and be connected with other women who are in the same situation. But going through an IVF, going through an egg retrieval, because that's what you're doing, you're basically going through the medical procedure, is something that you need to educate yourself about, because it's not a party. You know, you are inducing, you know, hyperstimulation of your ovaries, you're having an egg, you know, retrieval. So it's very important to be educated and advocate for yourself. And you know what is so empowering is that I think this option to be able to preserve your fertility takes that social pressure off, because of what we started with. And I just want to be clear that there's so many healthcare professionals, you and I included, in integrity, that if you're 20 something thinking about doing this, reach out for a consult just to know what you're getting yourself into.
Oh,
and I'm so grateful that we are asking, you know, start asking about this. So that's my little soapbox. You know, you don't really know what you don't know until you get into that. And we are here to help. You're not alone.
And not every woman who is going to avail herself of the education and the information is ultimately going to decide to do egg freezing. And not every physician is going to make that recommendation for every young woman. She may be told to come back a few years later. She may be told that here are the other things you need to be thinking about. The point is the option exists. It exists in a user-friendly manner. Women can gather together, as you say, or individually with a healthcare provider, with a medical professional, and explore and make a more long-term informed family building plan. They can be proactive and empowered in accessing the technology that is available. I will say, as an attorney, I do often suggest to young women, some clinics that are offering fertility preservation are also offering a financial incentive. And the financial incentive is as follows. So there's a reduced fee for the stimulation and the retrieval and the cryopreservation of the eggs in exchange for an egg share with the clinic. So the clinic gets some of the eggs, they put them in their bank, they make them available to women who have infertility and need for donor egg. If you are a woman in your 20s and you are exploring egg freezing, and this option of participating in an egg share in exchange for a reduced rate for services at the clinic, if that is something that is of appeal to you, I encourage you to speak with an attorney before you're signing off on any documents with respect to sharing with an egg bank. That's a layer of complexity you shouldn't have to navigate on your own. I don't think that aspect of this is being as flushed out in these egg freezing parties.
Mm-hmm.
Best to consult individually, one-on-one with an attorney if that's the route you're considering.
Well, I think it's so important that you bring that up. Just even that terminology, egg share.
Yeah.
You know, it's truly when you, it's a whole different language. So that is just your right to know what that truly means and what that means to you. And, you know, and I just read a story about a woman who is, you know, egg sharing again because of, you know, her desire to help other women create their families. But that's a personal choice, and conversation around that is so important.
So 10 years ago, 20 years ago, these options did not exist for the single modern woman in her 20s. They do exist today. It's exciting. It's wonderful. It gives reason for pause, become informed, ask a lot of questions, access resources, start with Resolve. That's always going to be my go-to. Go to Resolve, start there, figure out how you can access a community, figure out how you can get educated, but it's just exciting and wonderful.
It is. And so now let's bump to 30, because now I think with my clients, the emotional component of 30, it's almost like, uh-oh, you know, now there becomes a little bit more of a burning desire that this comes to the forefront, you know, that you have to take action, or you should take action.
Yep.
So now you're 30.
We have women in our 30s who are taking a different approach to this. Women in their 30s are not necessarily still in career building mode. They're not necessarily still in academic environments, right? They've completed even their advanced degrees for the most part. Certainly there are going to be women in their 30s that are still at that, on that part of the journey. But you come to your 30s, mid 30s perhaps, you're settled, you're ready to have a family, you're single, you're not going to let that distract you from this goal of being a mother. What are your options? Well, now we've got to look in and see, has your fertility declined? Where are we in our 30s? If you were in your 30s and still able to use your own eggs, that means that you will have a genetic connection to your child. We still need sperm. And women in their 30s have some options. They have, and this is becoming more and more, I see it in my office more and more, and I've certainly put it under this banner of the modern woman building her family, known sperm donation. So I get calls all the time from women who want to use their best friend, or who want to use some other person that they know who is willing to donate sperm to them. As long as he's medically cleared, you come to me and we're going to, or an attorney in your state. You always want to be speaking to somebody who is licensed in the state in which you are making your embryos. You talk about the issues of working with a known sperm donor, and that you want to be sure that you're establishing the intended status of that gentleman. If he's going to be a donor, we are going to draft papers that say he is a donor, forever a donor, and only a donor, and will have no claim to the child, but will also not have any responsibilities, meaning no child support responsibilities. If you're creating embryos with someone that you know, you're a single modern woman in your 30s, and you've considered co-parenting, well, now your sperm provider is not a sperm donor. He is going to be a parent, and if you are not married, under the banner of the modern single woman, this is a great family building model, but we also need to address what it means to create embryos with someone with whom you are not married, but intending to co-parent. So we enter into a different sort of legal document, different sort of legal discussions. The framework is there. It can be done. Anonymous sperm donation does not have the legal complexities that known sperm donation does, but a lot of women really are out there in the modern world handpicking from their social circles, from the folks, men with whom they have some sort of
connection, relationship, or yeah, not. You know, there's a whole other, you know, conversation about how people are getting sperm, you know, so that's a different conversation, but it's the legal mindfulness of this. Amy, I had an in-person group with a doctor in my group, beautiful, amazing women, and another woman who was married, but there was male factor. And they were actually sitting on the floor together, flipping through the catalog to order sperm from the sperm bank, and going, oh no, this doesn't meet what I have in mind. And at that moment, I thought, this is a little surreal, but this is so empowering and so amazing.
It is.
It's just, it's such a divine, empowering, I'm missing the word, for women to realize of their rights.
Yeah.
It's their right now to be able to have this choice. Yeah. So, okay, so now we're going, so if you're in that situation that you're going with a known donor, you're 30, should you freeze your eggs or freeze embryos? So that's the other conversation.
Yeah, and so, well, if you're intending to co-parent with, if you've identified a sperm provider, and that's typically the scenario that I am finding the woman in her 30s to be in, that she has identified a sperm provider, that the wanting to become pregnant has a bit more urgency. So we're not seeing as many women in their mid, and certainly not in their late 30s, thinking about freezing eggs. They're really not in fertility preservation mode, generally speaking. They really are in more active family building mode. So the woman in her 20s is generally in preservation mode. The woman in her 30s has shifted gear. She's in go. She's single. She's modern. And I will add just a couple of things about the known sperm, because I'm seeing a shift away from anonymous, away from flipping through a catalog. Certainly that's right for a large population of women, but there are also, the more modern women, I think, are considering the known sperm donor for a number of reasons. Not only is it fulfilling or gratifying for themselves to know their sperm provider, but it may be a part of their family building plan that the sperm provider is available to their child. It's certainly the sperm provider who's going to co-parent is going to be available to their child. But even if it is legally established that he is only a donor, there is not that wall of anonymity. I do want to issue one legal caveat. It is not encouraged for you to be doing at-home inseminations with your known sperm provider. Most states will want the insemination to be done by a medical professional in order for that gentleman to be recognized as a donor. If the medical professional is not facilitating the insemination, we see all sorts of court cases and all sorts of trouble when the donor actually is then recognized by the state as a parent, and child support is imposed upon him, even if that was not the
intended relationship, right? Even if it's not the intended relationship, he's being held to
child support. Now, I understand the financial incentive, and also you can add to the discussion about perhaps the sort of emotional, spiritual consideration of wanting to conceive in the beauty and the comfort of your home as opposed to in a clinical setting. Before making that decision, modern single woman in your 30s, before making that decision to do a home insemination, please do speak to an attorney in your state to be sure that you are in fact going to be able to achieve the arrangement you're anticipating. You may end up with a father to your child that you were not intending. You may
anticipating. So you know what, Amy, I think that's a good, that we need to tweet that out, you know, about, you know, really being mindful of that very important question. And then I believe some clinics, and I could be wrong, have nurse practitioners that you can arrange for the insemination. So there's ways to speak to the clinic that you can have an arrangement with the clinic to do the insemination in a way that's not all the way through. It's what is it, a natural insemination, so that you're not you don't have to go through their protocol if you just want to be inseminated. I shouldn't be speaking to that, but I know a client of mine had that conversation. She was actually in the medical field and found a clinic that she could go for that purposes, so that it was done by a medical person.
I have no doubt clinics are being very responsive to the modern single woman and wanting to accommodate the modern single woman. In New York, the statute in New York is vague as to what medical professional is. How do we define medical professional in New York? It does not say a reproductive endocrinologist office with your feet up in stirrups. That's not what the statute says. It does say that the insemination has to be facilitated, I'm paraphrasing, by a medical professional, but that's a little bit of a blurry reference. So speak to an attorney in your state to be sure that you are achieving the family you are intending and that you're not going to be knocked off track by some legality that you weren't aware of. And most attorneys, I will say, and I say this often, Kristen, when you and I speak, If you're not speaking with an attorney who's willing to answer a couple of questions on the phone without billing you, or answer an email without billing you, find another attorney.
Right.
You'd be able to get some basic questions answered, and then you and the attorney decide if there are further legal services that need to be provided, and do you need to enter into a formal retainer with that attorney. But if you've got an attorney who's going to start billing you from the minute he or she picks up the phone, call somebody else.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
See, that's what I love about you. So then the other thought that we have to talk about, the 30-year-old modern woman creating her family. So if you, go through the process and then you have embryos left over, there's a fee for storage, and to be thinking, to have the plan of what are you anticipating that you're going to do with those also.
Yes. And I find that my single clients tend to be very open to embryo donation. And so embryo donation is an option. It is a legal process. It is something that you will need assistance with. You will hire 2 attorneys to engage in an embryo donation. You may be able to donate through your clinic. So your clinic may have a pool of women who cannot otherwise afford family building because they can't afford the IVF. So they need already created embryos for transfer. So there are programs out there. It is important, you are right to bring it up, to anticipate that at some point in time you will be done with your family building and you may have these remaining embryos. And so now we're talking about then being a donor of those embryos to someone else for family building.
Or if you decide just to, there's options that if you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to do that or can do that, there's other options about, the one I decided was when, I would transfer them back within me and let them, not in need to get a pregnancy, but just so that they would naturally be, like it was a natural period for me, and I didn't get pregnant. So it was, for me, it was back then, that was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. Maybe now if I was that young woman, with all the talk about the amazing option of building your family through donation, that's so powerful.
Yeah, and so donation to science is a popular option, at least amongst my client base. I see that quite often with my clients of 3-5 years ago who are now done with their family building. They have remaining embryos. They reach out to me, Amy, I don't want to pay the storage fees any longer. What are my options? A good deal of my clients will opt for donation to science, so that's an option. You can ask the clinic to thaw the embryos, essentially allowing them to just naturally seize. There are clinics who are doing what you're referring to, and they call it a compassionate transfer. So you transfer at a time when the uterus is not receptive to embryos. There won't be implantation, and yes, then the embryos just naturally flush out of the body. So there are lots and lots of options. But with respect to women, the modern single woman who is in family building mode, being the recipient of donor embryos is something I see for women who now are even a little bit older. So the woman in her 20s is thinking about fertility preservation. The woman in her 30s is more active about accessing her own eggs with a sperm provider. The woman in her 40s is ready, set, go. She is typically the profile of the woman I see, not all. Certainly I have had embryo recipients be in their 30s, but the woman in her 40s will likely need donor gametes, meaning she's not going to be able to rely on her own eggs because her fertility has declined, generally speaking. She's the single modern woman, so we need a sperm provider. Some of those women will go for egg donation, sperm donation. Some of those women will go for embryo donation. It is still a path to motherhood. It is still accessing the best of technology that's out there with all of the support of all of the resources that are available to the modern woman. A little more complex because now we're talking about bringing in donor gametes, both egg and sperm, or already fertilized embryos. That's what the woman in her 40s is anticipating. If you are anticipating family building with an egg donor and a sperm donor, you are going to need the services of an attorney. You will find an attorney in your state who has experience in assisted family building, and they will help be sure we can establish you as the parent. Now, sometimes along this journey, we also have to bring in a surrogate. There's a medical need or some other need to bring in a surrogate. That's another layer of complexity. Not in every state can you use a surrogate, use donor egg and donor sperm, and immediately get your name on a birth certificate. If you don't have a genetic connection to the child and another woman is delivering, sometimes the legal complexity is ratcheted up just a bit more, and we have to start talking about adoption. So things get more complex as you get older. But what's beautiful about this conversation that we're having, Kristen, is we're not talking about roadblocks. We're talking about can-dos. We're talking about can-dos. The finish line is in sight for any woman who wants to pursue family building at these various stages in her life. Yes, it will take more time as you get older. Yes, it will be more costly as you get older, but how wonderful that these options exist.
It is so amazing to be able to sit here and talk to you about this. You know, you and I have been in the fertility industry, because now it's an industry, for over 20 years. Yeah. And the changes for women. And you know what, Amy, before we go, I have to talk about something, because this was brought up to me, and I'm still processing this. I think there might be a little bit of an educational gap for women, and that's why this talk is so powerful about the process and about the success rates, that there are so many options and there's so many ways that you can be a mother as a modern single woman, but it's not a slam dunk. The statistical and medical history has to be brought in. I was told of this saying, and I'm still processing what this means, about outsourcing a pregnancy. And I was a little taken aback by it, and, you know, bit my tongue. And you know me, I'm not a bite my tongue kind of girl, because I wanted to figure that out. But for me, that statement really meant there's a gap of education, right? So that you have all these options now, that you can be empowered to, you know, preserve your fertility. You can be empowered to create embryos, and then you can be empowered to create your family. But the process in there is still a medical process. And that needs to be talked about. And what does it mean when you outsource your pregnancy? And you address that a little bit through what you just said, if you're a modern single woman in your 40s, about using donor egg, donor embryos, and what that means legally. So that I just want to be that maybe cautioning little whisper that it's profound and available, but there's still some things that you need to be aware of, that this process can be done, is being done, and you have support along the way. But there is things that are not as easy peasy lemon squeezy as they're being talked about, if that makes sense. And
that is a very fair point. And I think one of the ways we sort of ignore the complexities is when we choose not to address the financial constraint and the financial burden. And typically, if you are a single woman, you may have less resources available. You may not. I mean, you may have developed such a tremendous career that you, by the time you're 40, can easily afford all these things. But we have to acknowledge the reality of, we said we're minimizing roadblocks, but financial constraint is often a roadblock on many paths to maternity, paths to motherhood. And so we remind folks that today, the modern single woman has financial resources available to her more and more every year than has ever been the case. So there are organizations, and go to Resolve. Resolve has a comprehensive list of scholarships, grants, loan programs. Our dear friend Davina Funkhauser at Fertility Within Reach can certainly help with overcoming insurance hurdles. So I guess the takeaway message here is get out there, get your information, make your family building plan, feel excited, feel empowered, be informed, and just be grateful that you're family building in 2016 going forward.
And rock on.
Yeah.
Because you know what? It's the generation that's coming is the love around these opportunities. It's going to create our future, and it's powerful. So Amy Demma, I love our conversation, and I love that we start asking about how to create your family as a single modern woman. And in my mind, I'm going to still think we are.
Good.
So how do people find us? How do people find you, Amy?
Law Offices of Amy Demma. I have a blog site, eggdonationtoday.com. 516-662-7532 is my office number. If you just Google Amy Demma, I've been in the field 14 years. I am extremely active in the nonprofit community. So lots and lots of links to me will come up if you put my name into a Google search. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter page is exclusive to family building. It is not personal. You can find my Law Offices of Amy Demma page on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. But really, if you just Google Amy Demma Infertility, all the links to the work that I'm doing will be there. And I look forward to, and I am a New York licensed attorney. So if you're sitting and viewing this and you're getting excited, but you're sitting in Oklahoma or Texas or California, call me and I will help you find the right attorney in your state.
Thank you so much. And of course, all Amy's information will be under the video. So thank you so much, Amy. Have a great rest of the day. And NIAW, National Infertility Awareness Week. Thanks, Amy.
Bye-bye.